At 1.7 centimeters thick, the baked mud tablet, catalogued as CBS 5567, left a faint grit on the burlap gloves that lifted it from shelf 42B in the Istanbul Archaeology Archive, its cuneiform wedges recording the star catalogue of MUL, Anne as quietly as frost settling on a windowpane. A 32x loop under amber lamplight measured the angles of Jupiter and Mars to the nearest third of a degree, echoing legends of Anunnaki watchers descending to tutor nightkeepers in celestial order. The clay still smells of river mud and smoked reeds, mineral tang mixed with the musk of 100 years of storage, speaking softly of a priestly job, counting planets for the god's schedule. An infrared thermometer resting nearby read 19.3 degrees C, confirming the precise environment demanded by this fragile task manuscript. Under a humidity gauge hovering at 47.8%, the tablet refuses to crumble, as though the watcher's directives remain intact. Its surfaces hold both dust and divination, making myth and measurement collide in a single palm-sized world. Do those etched angles confirm a legend or record a task faithfully completed for unseen sky beings who demanded perfect timing? Subscribe for more midnight histories. In the winter of 1927, under a blackout curtain that muted the mopeds outside Baghdad's Ottoman barracks, curator Selma al-Qudair warmed her hands above a brass brazier and leaned toward a rope-strung desk where a newly arrived fragment from Tel Hamal waited to be dusted. The piece carried the notch of a transport accident, yet its surviving inscription traced the roster of temple astronomers assigned to the Yanara sanctuary, each name partnered with a duty, oiling the astrolabe rings, polishing the obsidian mirror that caught Venus. Outside, the tigress ran low, a glassy ribbon carrying scattered moonlight past the shutter slats that rattled whenever a donkey cart jolted the cobbles. Selma dabbed clove-scented wax across the surface so the raised signs glowed, then whispered the names aloud, letting the consonants vibrate like lullaby bells in the curtained dark. She pressed her ear to the clay, half pretending she could hear the scratch of a long-dead stylus. The fragment's edges rasped against cotton swabs, sending a fine powder of dust that tasted faintly of salt and ash across her tongue. She imagined each ancient watcher climbing the ziggurat stairs with copper bolts clinking, the air taut with incense and desert chill, their vigil promising safety to the sleeping city below. This intimate labour turned mythic overseers into exhausted colleagues bent over star charts, breathing patience into the midnight shift. 3 millennia earlier in Uruk Level 4, archaeologists traced the post-hole pattern of the earliest known reed-bound observatory, measuring its 4.3-metre radius with fibre tapes under the harsh glint of midday sun, the ground still damp from a dawn watering that kept dust from choking journals. Soil samples lifted with paintbrushes released the scent of damp clay and charred date pits, suggesting lamps burned throughout the night. The excavation team recorded how the circular floor bore scorch marks from continuous fire, hinting at a ritual where the Anunnaki's envoys, the Apkallu sages later called watchers, were invoked through flame, aligned star calculations. Nearby, a cache of lapis-inlaid beads lay tangled with goat hair, salt still crusting the fibres, perhaps offerings for maintaining cosmic balance. A reed flute fragment lay beside a stone weight, implying music softened the vigil, even as measurements demanded precision. These evidences reveal that the job of the temple astronomer tasted of smoke and copper, proving that mythic sky beings were woven into routine maintenance of calendar and flood warnings. Could a community survive the Euphrates moods without those sleepless custodians aligning celestial rhythms with levee gates? Further north at Tel Lelen, magnetometer sweeps mapped a rectilinear complex with a northern wall, 62 meters long, revealing a sealed chamber whose plaster still retained the faint sheen of gypsum under portable LED beams. Archaeologists noted a drop in temperature to 14 degrees Celsius within the chamber, cool air brushing sweat from their forearms as they lifted bricks with padded trowels. Inside, conservators uncovered clay figurines with wide eyes inlaid with mother of pearl, their palms pressed together over tablets scored with duty rosters for the Ilu Amam, the sky beings expected to audit human diligence every new moon. Residual pollen analysis identified juniper and sweet flag, suggesting scent trails meant to attract divine scrutiny, as scribes recited flood warnings recorded in precise Akkadian. A bronze bell fragment lay nearby, its tones still chiming faintly when brushed, as if the watcher's schedule vibrated in the metal memory. Farmers listening on the other side of the door heard low chanting and the drip of cooling plaster, believing their livelihoods balanced on that recitation. The sand remembers. Instruments hum in low patience, the hollow weights with moonlit dust held still. At Nippur's scribal quarter, stratigraphic trench 8 yielded a column of tablet debris fused by an ancient roof collapse, each layer separated by fine silt that smelled faintly of crushed reeds when moistened for lifting. Conservators spritzed distilled water from glass bottles, the droplets beading on clay like dew on thatch. Among the fragments lay instructions for the Masatu's duty, the night watch rotation linking temple rooftops via polished copper mirrors to relay signals from the ziggurat where the watchers were believed to alight. A surviving line dated to the reign of Shulgi enumerated payments. 2 measures of barley, 3 strips of dried lamb for maintaining the mirror's shine so the Anunnaki would see their reflection unclouded. Nearby, a broken mirror frame revealed finger grooves worn smooth by nightly polishing, tactile proof of persistent care. These details reveal the job's tangible stakes. Dull mirrors risked missing an omen, and the city feared unheralded storms. How differently would mythology read if it had preserved the smell of oil-smoked copper and the ache of lifting mirrors above the wind? On the banks of the Diyala, a newly cleaned cylinder seal in translucent chalcedony caught the dissecting lamp with oceanic shimmer, its engraving showing Kululu, a hybrid fishman messenger, presenting a braided cord to a seated figure crowned with horned headdress labelled as Dingir. En. Men. The collective of sky rulers. The conservator's gloves squeaked softly against the stone, and a faint coolness radiated from the seal, despite the room's warmth. The scene includes a human astronomer kneeling, stylus against wax board, capturing directives to adjust irrigation sluices by 3 finger breadths before the solstice. Residual pigment trapped in the engravings tasted metallic on the tongue, likely from crushed azurite, reinforcing that the ritual encompassed touch, taste, and the sonic click of stone against clay. A faint groove across the astronomer's sleeve suggests repeated use of the seal as an administrative stamp, stamping accountability into wet clay. In this miniature theatre, the watchers assign practical orders nested inside luminous ore, suggesting that their supposed divinity cloaked bureaucratic precision which kept canals from choking. Isn't reverence easier to maintain when survival depends on the same beings you name as stars? In the ruined courts of the Iker temple complex, archaeoseismologists traced hairline fractures across the altar threshold, measuring displacement of 4.6 centimeters produced by an earthquake catalogued in a tablet now housed in the British Museum. They ran fingertips along the fissures, feeling the grit loosen like sugar crystals. That quake, dated to 1830 BCE, corresponded with a ceremonial reinvention. Priests introduced bronze gongs tuned to a low C, resonating through limestone so the faithful heard vibrations even behind woven partitions. The instruments left verdigris stains on the floor, a green halo around each suspension peg. The liturgy invoked the watchers to steady the trembling earth, blending tremor data with sonic therapy. Lifting one corroded gong released a smell of copper and soot, reminding us that calming a populace required both sacred theatre and metallurgical labour. Instead of passive idols, the Anunnaki were recast as supervisors of vibration, guaranteeing stability. Might the quake's memory have faded without the bronze workers who recast acoustic reassurance into myth? During the reign of Hammurabi, the code's lesser-known appendices listed penalties for neglecting the Wangzan Masatu, the temple's sentinel scribes. Clay envelopes recovered from Sippar display impressions of rolled cords, evidence of tamper-proof archives storing nightly omen logs. When researchers unwrapped one under ultrasonic humidifiers, a fragrance of old bitumen and cedar oil escaped, the same supplies used to waterproof watch platforms. The tablet inside described meteoric streaks and required the supervising astronomer to kneel before a bronze basin, washing ink-stained fingers before updating the Anunnaki's schedule. Scribes noted the sound of rush pens tapping stone, comparing it to rain on rooftops to describe the ideal cadence. This ritual mattered, misreport a meteor, and irrigation taxes misalign, angering both humans and sky beings. The room's lamplight gilded fresh ink, casting a calm glow over the administrative urgency. Would we dismiss such myths if we sat in that hushed alcove, ink drying on skin? In the Mari archive, letter Arm 2858, written on a tablet barely larger than a palm, references the Apkalik dispatched from Aleppo to recalibrate the king's storm calendar after an unexpected lull in the thunder season. The tablet, once heated to 710 GC in a kiln, now rests under fiber optic lights that cast a serene silver sheen across its surface. The scribe described rainmakers drumming on stretched hides scented with frankincense, their cadence coordinating messengers stationed on parapets, communicating with mirrored flashes believed to echo the watcher's gaze. A colophon lists the weights of oil allocated to keep the hides supple, confirming the economic care behind the ceremony. This interplay of percussion, scent and light anchored the populace amid climatic uncertainty, as evidence-based adjustment fused with mythic reassurance. The tablet's edges carry tiny nicks, each a reminder of hands that hurried the message through corridors. How many leaders found their legitimacy inside the soft glow of such pragmatic miracles? Centuries later, in the archives of Hattusa, clay tablets inscribed with Hurrian incantations record borrowed Mesopotamian watchers overseeing oath ceremonies conducted before iron daggers chilled by mountain snow. Archaeologists dusting the tablets heard the crunch of frost beneath their boots, because the chamber sits carved into bedrock where cold air pools year-round, protecting the script from decay. Torch holders wrapped their fingers in wool to avoid dropping wax, the scent of tallow mingling with breaths visible in the frigid light. The ritual demanded flames flickering against polished basalt walls, casting winged shadows that must have seemed like sky beings descending to witness treaty promises. This ceremony conferred power by binding political alliances to the gaze of imported Anunnaki, implying that neglecting duties invited both divine and human reprisal. Silence held as each participant placed a palm on the dagger, feeling its bite. The snow exhales under stone vaults, torches sway, an unseen choir pauses with breath tasting of iron patience. By the time Greek mercenaries reached Babylon in the 5th century BCE, they recorded in papyrus journals how Chaldean astronomers climbed night stairs carrying bronze clepsydra humming with water, their sandals stickied by resin poured to deaden squeaks as moonlit courts hushed. The papyrus fibers still carry a faint sweetness of preserved honey used to glue them, revealing the tactile patience behind each account. These visitors noted that the sky guardians monitored eclipses with shadow sticks calibrated to finger segments, translating celestial timing into omens that dictated troop salaries, meanwhile charting the measured breath of the city. They fanned themselves with woven reeds as heat radiated from baked brick, instead keeping their eyes on the lunar rim while silence held around the temple bells. Greek curiosity reframed Anunnaki as planetary intelligences, though their awe lingered as they inhaled temple incense blending pine and myrrh. How else could foreign soldiers interpret the disciplined choreography of measurements, chants, and soft gongs except as proof that luminous beings tutored their hosts? In Persepolis archives, Achaemenid administrative tablets written in Elamite detail, the stipend assigned to Babylonian experts hired to staff royal observatories overlooking the Apadana, the stone floor cool beneath cloaked feet, even under midday glare. These experts carried astrolabes forged in bronze that perfumed the air with heated metal each time sunbeams struck polished edges, and their records included notes on humidity, warning that dry winds warped instrument cords. They described their services as translating the will of the watchers of the sky ladder into agricultural quotas. Persian administrators valued the ritual, because accurate star calendars determined when to release rations to satrapal granaries, anchoring imperial stability. Scribes added red ink to margins, highlighting critical days when labour should pause for offerings. Instead of superstition, the watchers became imperial auditors, whose silence implied satisfaction. Can we separate awe from governance when cosmic schedules determined who ate? In the caves near Qumran, the humid whisper of the Dead Sea clung to parchment fragments of the Book of the Watchers, their ink shimmering faintly under multispectral imaging that reveals copper-green traces hidden to naked eyes. Conservators spritz the air with deionized water to keep salt from crystallizing, the droplets settling like fine dew. The text retells Mesopotamian tales through apocalyptic urgency, describing sky beings teaching metallurgy, cosmetics, and weather divination before being bound beneath mountains. Scholars handling the parchment breathe through linen masks to avoid salt-laden air that could dissolve the collagen fibers, illustrating how fragile the transmission became. Even here, the narrative stresses occupational value. Forbidden knowledge about mixing pigments and forging blades, skills that empowered communities. Marginal notes warn against arrogance, as if the parchment itself still smoulders with caution. Would the desert wind still sing through these caves if those teachings had been forgotten entirely? In the Ethiopian highlands, the Kebra Nagast's lesser-known passages reference Ijil Nagastat, watchers of the sky vault, linking them to guardianship of the Ark replica, carried in night processions that rustle with silken umbrellas and drumbeats muffled by goat hide. Manuscripts on parchment dyed with berry juice record priests, dipping white-robed sleeves into incense burners heavy with frankincense, their nostrils stung by resinous smoke, as they chant about angelic beings guiding royal lineage. The call and response echoes against basalt walls damp with mist, then spills into fields where farmers listen for the signal to begin planting after Sirius rises. Here the Anunnaki motif softens into guardian angels, yet the ritual keeps practical cadence. Drums mark tempo for irrigation prayers. Children taste honeyed injera prepared for the vigil, associating sweetness with stellar timing. The valley exhales, bells murmur. A blue dusk settles with the taste of frankincense lingering against stone lips. In 9th century Baghdad, translators at the Beit al-Hikmah copied the astronomical treatise of Sindhind onto parchment that smelled of saffron and lamp smoke, cataloguing star positions inherited from Babylonian records. Al-Kindi's circle described the ancient watchers not as winged giants, but as perfected intellects whose teachings about eclipse cycles fortified agricultural prognostication. Apprentices rinsed reed pens in bowls of rosewater, the droplets catching lamplight before falling onto tile. By grinding lapis into ink, they visually tethered the script to night skies, creating a sensory bridge between data and devotion. The workrooms hummed with the scrape of pen over burnished paper, and mathematicians tested star tables with brass armillary spheres that reflected candlelight like captive comets. Marginal glosses linked particular stars to irrigation sluice operations, anchoring philosophy in canal management. This scholarship repurposed myth into orderly practice, yet the reverence lingers beneath each equation. Could the caliph's granaries have thrived without this calm stewardship of celestial rhythms? In 12th century Toledo, Gerard of Cremona leaned over Arabic manuscripts translated into Latin, the vellum warm beneath his fingertips from the nearby brazier that kept damp at bay. He annotated marginalia about custodes coelis, mapping them onto Christian angelology, yet preserving the procedural detail of nightly vigils, such as timing psalms to align with the pre-dawn heliacal rising of Jupiter. Candlemakers downstairs poured tallow, the sweet fat scent drifting upward while scribes mouthed vowels softly to keep rhythm. The scriptorium rang with muted hammering from metalworkers forging astrolabes in adjoining rooms, blending iron scent with the honeyed wax of taper candles. By transporting these instructions northward, Gerard empowered cathedral schools to regulate liturgical calendars and agricultural fairs. His quill paused whenever gusts rattled stained glass panes, reminding him how fragile translation could feel. Silence held as the translator marked a cross beside crucial lines, hearing only the quill's hush across vellum. The parchment warms, embers pulse. The night listens for a bell carried by patient hands on chilled stone. In Mongol-ruled Tabriz, Rashid al-Din compiled the Jamis al-Tawarik and described Chaldean starkeepers teaching ill-cannied astrologers to schedule royal hunts by lunar momentum, the parchment saturated with pomegranate dye that perfumed each folio. Court astronomers recorded the crunch of snow under hooves as they tested predictions, linking mythic watches to real supply chains that fed armies with dried lamb and fermented mare's milk. Miniature paintings depict luminous figures hovering above astronomers, yet their hands grip sextants, anchors of practicality. A side note calculates how many torches to prepare for night marches, showing logistics woven into legend. These narratives reveal a rediscovery cycle, conquerors adopting conquered wisdom, ensuring survival in new climates. How else could riders navigate the steppes' silent frost without trusting the scribes who whispered of Anunnaki guardians? In Florence, Marsilio Ficino's translation of Hermetic texts cited superiores custodes guiding planetary harmony, echoing Babylonian lore preserved through Arabic commentaries. His studio smelled of time smouldering in bronze censers meant to purify the mind, while lute strings vibrated softly against plaster walls glowing with candlelight. Ficino advised patrons to align civic rituals with planetary hours, arguing that this restored the watch's benevolent oversight and strengthened the Republic's fortunes. Assistants ground malachite into powder, tinting diagrams a cool green that soothed anxious eyes. The blending of song, scent, and precise timing demonstrates how myth re-emerged as a psychological balm during political turbulence. Does this revival show nostalgia, or a strategic return to ancient project management disguised as enchantment? In 1602, Jesuit astronomer Matteo Ricci carried Babylonian-derived eclipse charts to Beijing, the silk wrappers crackling in the dry winter air as he presented them to scholars of the Ming court. The observatory atop the city wall, paved with frost-slick stone, resonated with bronze armillary spheres inherited from Islamic artisans, their chill biting through cotton gloves. Ricci translated watcher myths into the language of celestial bureaucracy, describing sky beings as loyal officials maintaining heaven's clockwork. His hosts burned pine incense, the smoke curling around metal instruments while scribes dipped brushes into thick black ink. The emperor valued these charts because accurate eclipse predictions calmed the populace, preventing rumors of cosmic disorder. Lanterns perfumed with sandalwood swayed as astronomers compared calculations, integrating ancient Mesopotamian precision into East Asian ritual. Can we call it superstition when the stakes were social harmony and imperial legitimacy? In 1691, in the archives of the Royal Society, Edmund Halley examined antiquarian reports from Nineveh, the parchment smelling faintly of mildew from a Thames flood. He noted the correlation between watcher stories and precession calculations, scribbling margins with chalk-dusted fingers as pneumatic pumps hissed nearby during atmospheric experiments. A coal fire crackled, releasing sulfur tang that mixed with wax. Halley proposed that the ancients encoded astronomical cycles in angelic narratives, but his peers dismissed the idea as fanciful, suppressing publication in official proceedings. The rejection muffled a bridge between myth and science, leaving the clay tablets boxed in linen that clung to damp chill. Yet the idea lingered like pipe smoke curling under the ceiling, waiting for rediscovery. Could the boundary between legend and observation have blurred earlier if Halley's note had circulated? In 1820, Ottoman engineer Hussein Rifat oversaw repairs on the towering minaret built over ancient Babylonian foundations, feeling the grit of centuries as he removed bricks that once formed a ziggurat stair. Sweat soaked his collar, despite the morning breeze carrying cumin and dust from market stalls. Amid the rubble, he found a limestone plaque etched with winged figures and instructions for aligning shadow-casting rods at noon, the letters still sharp despite the heat. The plaque, rubbed with olive oil to coax clarity, smelled of sun-baked stone and kitchen spice. Hussein documented the find in a notebook that rustled like leaves, yet the imperial office filed it away, wary of inflaming local legends about sky beings reclaiming the tower. Suppression grew from fear of unrest, silencing a practical manual for maintaining timekeeping infrastructure. What knowledge sleeps when authority fears illumination? In 1849, Austin Henry Layard dug through the mound of Kuyunjik, the air vibrating with locust buzz and pickaxes striking compacted clay. Workers chewed dates, their sweetness cutting the metallic taste of sweat, as they hauled baskets toward shaded trenches. Under a canvas awning smelling of tar and camel sweat, Layard lifted a giant relief showing winged genies flanking the tree of life, their hands holding buckets of pollinated resin. The carving's detail, the crisp folds of garments, the textured feathers, confirmed that these watchers presided over agricultural fertility, sprinkling sacred water across orchards. Layard's team sketched by lamplight, their charcoal smudging from sweaty palms, entranced by the tactile message that divine beings managed irrigation schedules. Yet the British Museum displayed the relief as exotic art, downplaying its manual of agrarian stewardship to avoid challenging theological narratives back home. The tent flutters, charcoal dust rises, the twilight holds a breath tasting of coppery earth and unasked questions. In 1857, Henry Rawlinson, Jules Oppert, and Edward Hincks convened to cross-validate the decipherment of Akkadian cuneiform. The room lit by oil lamps whose soot streaked the plaster ceiling in smoky arabesques. They pressed damp paper onto clay squeezers, feeling the raised text imprint against their fingertips as they confirmed lists of Sukalu Amane, sky courtiers who scheduled temple vigils. Inkpots smelled of iron gall, sharp and tannic, mingling with the wool scent of their coats. Their consensus transformed mythic names into job titles, proving the administrative backbone behind stories of the Watchers. The accomplishment carried the bite of ink mixed with vinegar, its scent lingering as they signed affidavits. Still, church newspapers warned that such translations threatened doctrinal certainty, nudging the scholars to temper their claims. How many discoveries must whisper before the world is ready to listen without fear? In 1876, French archaeologist Jeanne d'Ulefoy recorded in her Persepolis field diary the discovery of glazed bricks showing winged figures bending over irrigation sluices, their turquoise glaze shimmering beneath desert sun that heated the air to a quivering 41°C. She rubbed chalk across the relief to highlight the grooves, the chalk dust catching in her throat along with the spice of nearby saffron stalls. Her assistant misted the bricks to keep them cool, droplets hissing on the sun-baked surface. The depiction included copper tools, suggesting that these celestial attendants supervised hydraulic maintenance critical to sustaining the empire's granaries. Jean shipped the bricks to Paris, yet museum curators relegated them to storage, uncomfortable with female-authored interpretations linking mythic beings to labor. Institutional silence muffled her insight, delaying recognition of practical engineering encoded in divine iconography. The kiln remembers, saffron drifts, evening cools with a hushed tasting of lime wash and distant seas. In 1893, Helena Blavatsky's followers gathered in a London parlour, thick with sandalwood smoke and velvet drapes, reading translations of Enuma Elish while a phonograph clicked softly. The wallpaper, flocked with crimson flourishes, trapped heat and perfume, making the room feel like a cocoon. They reimagined the Watchers as extraterrestrial mentors, overlaying the aroma of paraffin lamps with the metallic tang of newly electrified wires humming in the walls. Though speculative, their enthusiasm revived interest in Mesopotamian texts, funding new acquisitions for the British Museum and encouraging comparative studies. Participants passed around meteorite fragments kept in velvet boxes, letting the cool metal anchor their fantasies. Yet by draping science fiction over clay evidence, they blurred distinctions between documented ritual and desire. The tension between sensation and scholarship clung like warm dust to the parlour's tapestry. Are we still listening to the tablets when we paint them with our wishes? In 1905, German Assyriologist Hugo Winkler excavated Balhazquai and linked Hittite myths to Babylonian watchers, his camp filled with the smell of damp canvas and strong Turkish coffee simmering over charcoal. Rain pattered on tent roofs. a steady rhythm that mirrored the clatter of tablets stacked for drying. He catalogued tablets referencing WWII, celestial inspectors approving sacrificial protocols, reinforcing the notion of divine auditors ensuring ritual accuracy. His meticulous reproduction rubbings crackled as they dried in the Anatolian breeze, yet national rivalries over publication rights delayed dissemination. Political caution acted as a new suppression, leaving findings locked in crates while empires negotiated. During twilight, the archaeologists listened to crickets aligning their rhythm with the scribes' ancient timetables. Could diplomacy have moved faster if everyone felt the urgency of that buzzing cadence? In 1916, American archaeologist Edgar Banks shipped phonograph cylinders from Mesopotamia capturing lullabies sung by marshland villagers who credited the watchers with teaching rhythm for calming buffalo. The wax smelled faintly of beeswax and river reeds, and playback revealed soft reed flutes echoing across water, punctuated by distant splashes. Banks annotated how these songs preserved instructions for timing floodgate openings, disguised as devotionals to sky beings. He even noted pauses where singers inhaled deeply, cues for workers to shift positions. However, wartime censorship seized the recordings, fearing coded messages, and the melodies languished unheard until decades later. The silence demonstrates how conflict interrupts gentle knowledge. When the cylinders finally played again, the hiss of static mingled with distant frogs, bridging myth and hydraulic expertise. Might we treat every lullaby as an archive of survival? In 1924, archaeologist Leonard Woolley brushed soot from a gold lyre at Ur, the instrument's bull-headed frontlet cool under tent shade as desert wind rattled canvas walls. He recorded the exact spacing of strings, 1.9 centimeters apart, before restoration, ensuring future musicians could resurrect the tone. The lyre's silver strings, restored, vibrated faintly when touched, releasing a whisper of tarnish and cedar. Glyphs on the accompanying plaque credited the watchers with gifting harmonies to calm storm gods, yet the notation correlated with agricultural task lists, music used to coordinate canal laborers during flood defense drills. Woolley's notes, smudged with chalk and sweat, hinted at the job's power, rhythm aligning muscle and myth. Museum displays emphasized the lyre's glamour, muting the logistical genius encoded in the performance. The strings sigh, dust swirls, twilight carries a taste of bronze, and lullabies mingled with river-cool patience. In 1933, British pilot Amy Johnson flew aerial surveys over Mesopotamian plains, her cockpit smelling of engine oil and doped canvas, photographing ziggurat outlines and irrigation scars that matched ancient descriptions of watcher stations. She navigated by compass and star, noting how the Euphrates shimmered like molten silver beneath. The film negatives, cooled in ice boxes, revealed alignments between temple towers and canal junctions, confirming that the sky being's dwellings doubled as hydraulic control centers. Johnson's reports, typed on crisp onion skin paper, suggested that mythology preserved a maintenance map. Yet colonial administrators prioritized oil exploration, sidelining her proposal to restore traditional water timing. Her plane's drone faded into desert quiet, leaving the evidence tucked in filing cabinets that smelled of dust and glue. How different might the marshlands look if the photographs had guided policy? In 1947, Bedouin shepherds discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, their fingers dusty from handling parchment hidden in jars sealed with resin that perfumed the cave with aged honey scent. Among the fragments, the Book of Giants resurfaced, echoing Babylonian watcher lore with names transcribed in Aramaic, extending the myth into new tongues. Scholars used darkroom trays filled with chemical baths smelling of vinegar to coax the text onto photographic plates, pairing fragile evidence with meticulous care. The limestone walls felt cool against their backs as they hunched over makeshift desks. The rediscovery reinforced the idea that sky beings taught craftsmanship, now reframed as warnings against unbridled knowledge. Does the cave's echo still carry the heartbeat of those who first sealed the jars? In 1952, Iraqi archaeologist Taha Bakir supervised the reconstruction of the Ishtar Gate, The glazed bricks rinsed with diluted vinegar to revive their lapis sheen, the water running cold across workers' arms under June heat. He noted how parade reliefs of winged spirits aligned with processional routes timed by astronomical markers, reinforcing the watchers' role as guardians of civic order. Workers hammered copper dowels into place, the clang ringing against brick like distant thunder. Bakir's reports emphasized the engineering precision, yet political turmoil shortly after led to archives being locked away, research paused out of caution. The gate's lions gleamed even in shadow, reminding onlookers that myth resided inside brick and mortar. Could the city's memory have healed faster if these findings had been celebrated widely? In 1967, anthropologist Henry Wright trekked through southern Iraqi marshes, the air thick with dragonfly buzz and the smell of wet sedge, recording how Mardan elders recited tales of Al-Haris al-Samawis, who taught them to build floating reed islands. He balanced on bobbing mats slick with algae while writing notes that curled in humidity. His audio tapes captured the slap of poles against water, blending narrative with technique for anchoring homes amid shifting tides. Wright compared these stories to cuneiform instructions for marsh management, revealing continuity of practical knowledge attributed to sky beings. Yet modernization projects later drained the wetlands, erasing the living context of these rituals. The tapes now hold a watery echo of tasks once supervised by mythic watchers. Are we listening closely enough to preserve both story and skill? In 1974, French engineer André Parrot used ground-penetrating radar at Mari, the device emitting low beeps as it mapped subterranean chambers lined with bitumen that still glistened when exposed. Technicians wiped sweat from their brows as desert wind blew powdery sand across cables. The readings confirmed a network of observation rooms connected by voice tubes, enabling priests to whisper omen results to each other during storms while staying dry in clay-lined corridors. Engineers reconstructed the tubes with PVC replicas to test acoustics, discovering whispers carried clear as wind chimes. The discovery proved that the watcher's supposed omnipresence relied on clever sound engineering and architectural planning. Parrot's report smelled of blueprint ink and desert sweat, but funding cuts stalled further excavation. Silence filled the corridors once more, though the radar echoes remained archived on magnetic tape. What new harmonies could we uncover if we let machines listen longer? In 1983, Assyriologist Erika Reiner deciphered the mule, Apen Star Compendium's lesser columns, seated in a Chicago office where winter radiators clanged and the air tasted of paper dust and coffee. Snow smeared against the window pane, diffusing streetlight into a milky glow above her desk. She traced instructions for temple technicians to adjust gnomons using wet leather straps that contracted in cold, a tactile method to maintain accuracy when the watcher's schedule dictated court ceremonies. Her findings illuminated the intimate labor of drying straps by firelight, the scent of singed hide mingling with ink. Institutional emphasis on more sensational artifacts meant the study circulated quietly, a rediscovery whispered among specialists. The radiator sighs, snow hushes, lamplight gathers with a patient's tasting of burnt leather and early dawn. In 1992, geneticist Ciro Heyerdahl analysed human remains from Royal Sumerian tombs, extracting mitochondrial DNA in a lab humming with refrigeration units and smelling of ethanol. Fluorescent lights cast a cool glare on bone fragments cushioned in foam. The results indicated diverse lineages converging in Ur, supporting texts that spoke of watchers selecting specialists from distant lands to serve. This diversity reflected a deliberate policy. Mythic overseers symbolized inclusion of expert artisans, ensuring the city possessed every skill needed for survival. Notes pinned to corkboards tracked origins alongside craft specializations, lapidaries from the Taurus, boatwrights from Dilmun. Though the findings were rigorous, sensationalist media twisted them into alien narratives, overshadowing the collaborative reality. How different would public understanding be if we focused on the human networks mirrored in those myths? In 2001, acoustic engineer Trevor Cox conducted impulse response tests inside reconstructed ziggurat chambers, firing starter pistols whose cracks bounced into lingering reverberations that smelled faintly of cordite. Banked microphones blinking red captured the decay times, revealing a gentle 2.4-second sustain perfect for chant. The data proved that whispered prayers could carry along terraced walls, allowing priests to project voices like disembodied watchers. Cox compared recordings with reed pipe simulations, showing how pitch changes manipulated perceived height of sound. This practical application of acoustics validated textual claims that sky beings communicated without descending. He published the findings, yet popular culture fixated on extraterrestrial speculation, drowning the subtle science in sensational noise. The stone still holds the resonance, waiting for attentive ears. Do we honor ancient engineers when we ignore their precise acoustic feats? In 2012, satellite imagery analyzed by archaeologist Elizabeth Stone revealed irrigation remnants matching star alignments recorded on tablet K8388, the digital screens casting pale blue light across her night office that smelled of ozone from overworked electronics. She toggled between infrared and visible spectra, watching canals glow like veins. The images showed gatehouses positioned to reflect solstice sunbeams, confirming that the watch's directives embedded astronomical logic into water management. Stone's team overlaid data with thermal readings, illustrating how stored water cooled urban heat at dusk, a tangible gift from mythic overseers. They brewed cardamom coffee to stay awake, its aroma grounding the digital vigil. Despite the clarity, funding lagged as climate policy debates overshadowed archaeological insight. Could modern cities breathe easier if we embraced these ancient alignments? In 2014, curator Laetitia Gorski staged a multi-sensory exhibit in Paris, diffusing cedar and bitumen aromas while projecting laser maps of cuneiform observatories onto mist, the droplets cooling visitors' cheeks. She synchronized the visuals with deep-toned speakers that recreated low temple drums, letting vibrations tremble through the floor. She paired tablets with recordings of reconstructed chants, letting the audience feel the watcher's blend of data and devotion. Nearby cases displayed replica tools. Visitors encouraged to touch polished stone weights chilled to ziggurat night temperatures. Critics praised the immersive calm, yet some dismissed it as theatrical, ignoring the rigorous scholarship underpinning the display. Still, attendees left whispering about the taste of salt on the mist, newly aware that myth emerged from environments shaped by human hands. Is empathy a form of rediscovery we should nurture? In 2020, during lockdown, Iraqi archivist Noor al-Jabouri digitized fragile tablets from home, her apartment smelling of jasmine tea and ozone from a portable scanner. Outside, curfew sirens echoed softly. Meanwhile, silence held inside, as only the quiet whir of the device marked time. She used infrared filters, revealing faded entries listing rotations of Baru's diviners assigned to rooftop watchposts, each note cross-referenced with lunar cycles. Noor donned cotton gloves even in solitude, the fabric whispering against clay as she turned pages of her reference notebooks. The quiet clicking of the scanner replaced the temple bells. Instead, the data preserved the watcher's meticulous scheduling. Noor published open-access transcriptions, empowering global scholars to hear the ancient cadence through pixels. Still, limited bandwidth and political unrest threatened the project's continuity, though she kept uploading files whenever connections steadied. How many voices fade because the world forgets to protect digital breath? In 2021, anthropologist Ines Rahman recorded night winds sweeping over the ruins of Khorsabad, her microphone wrapped in felt that smelled of lanolin while the desert air tasted of chalk. She crouched beside a fallen lamassu, palm pressed to cold stone as gusts threaded through carved feathers. The audio captured low whistles through fractured blocks, matching descriptions of watchers communicating in rustling airs. She overlaid the soundscape with translations of workers' diaries that detailed night shift routines, oiling hinges, checking water levels, whispering prayers to unseen auditors. The file became a meditation on maintenance as devotion, a layered lullaby for ruins. Grant committees hesitated, deeming the work too poetic for funding. The wind leans, stars blink, equipment hums with a patient's tasting of chalk and woolen breath. In 2022, developers in Erbil collaborated with historians to craft a virtual reality reconstruction of the Etaminanki ziggurat. The headset foam smelling of new plastic as users ascended, simulated brick stairs under a digital sky. Haptic feedback mimicked the rough grit of fired clay beneath fingertips, and scripted sequences demonstrated how Watcher writes synchronized torch relays with astronomical data streamed from NASA archives. Programmers layered subtle vibrations into controllers so each chant pulsed through the palms, reminding participants of heartbeat tempo. The experience underscored the practical choreography. Every flame corresponded to a canal gate message. Every chant cued workforce shifts. Educators reported students emerging calm, imagining responsibility as sacred. Yet licensing disputes threatened the project's continuity, echoing older suppressions. Could a virtual pilgrimage remind us that stewardship is a timeless ritual? In 2023, climate scientist Rana Kassim consulted cuneiform flood records during a heatwave that made Basra's air taste of brine and diesel. Ceiling fans spun slowly above her workstation, stirring warm currents scented with paper. She correlated ancient seasonal adjustments with modern satellite rainfall patterns, discovering that Watcher-guided calendars reduced flood damage by staggering plantings. In a darkened lab lit by green monitor glow, she tapped keys while a dehumidifier hummed, integrating millennia-old data into resilience plans. She highlighted entries that mentioned offerings of barley bread to celebrate well-timed sluice openings, connecting ritual gratitude with practical success. Officials hesitated, wary of appearing to rely on myth, yet Rana framed the findings as community memory wrapped in story. Isn't respecting ancestral procedure another form of empirical wisdom? In 2024, an expedition to the Kurdish highlands deployed LiDAR drones, their rotors slicing crisp mountain air scented with wild thyme, to map a sanctuary carved into cliff faces. Engineers monitored screens in a tent where generator fumes mingled with coffee steam. The scans revealed niches containing bronze mirrors angled toward the north sky, matching texts about watchers descending on beams of starlight to inspect offerings of fermented barley. Researchers found residue analyses indicating the brew's cooling effect on fever, showing how ritual gifts served medical need. They recorded the hollow clang when wind brushed the mirrors, a ghostly chime echoing against limestone. Political tensions forced the team to encrypt their data, delaying publication to protect the site. How often does caution, born of reverence and fear, keep truths in limbo? In early 2025, marine archaeologists exploring the Persian Gulf's shallow basins used side-scan sonar, emitting soft clicks that echoed like whales under the hull, detecting drowned structures aligned with Orion's belt. Divers descended through water tasting of salt and engine lubricant, brushing silt from stone altars bearing inscriptions ordering watchers to oversee pearl harvest quotas. Bioluminescent plankton glowed around their gloves, turning the scene ethereal yet practical. The sky beings monitored economic lifelines. They collected oyster shells fused to alter edges, analyzing growth rings to reconstruct tidal patterns. The team logged water temperatures and current speeds, showing advanced understanding of tidal cycles hidden beneath myth. Investors' briefings celebrated the spectacle more than the science, risking distortion of the message. Can we protect the data from being washed into spectacle? In a quiet lab in Berlin that same year, conservator Lael Demir rehydrated a tablet with controlled humidity, the air smelling of distilled water and linen. She monitored hygrometer readings hovering at 52%, adjusting micromisters to keep the clay from cracking. As the surface softened, lines emerged detailing protocols for choosing apprentices to study under the Watcher's criteria, involving steady hands, patience, and willingness to stand in winter wind without complaint. The text spoke of the power such training conferred: secure food, respected status, the ability to read sky signs for the community. Lael traced each wedge with a bamboo tool under warm LED light, hearing only the gentle hum of climate control and her own breathing. She imagined the candidates lined along a parapet, cloaks snapping in icy gusts. Shouldn't mentorship itself be considered a sacred technology? In the desert outside Uruk, night volunteers now tend a community observatory built from mud brick, their breath-clouding winter air that smells of straw and distant river. They align low-cost telescopes with star charts inked from copies of MUL. Apen, teaching children how ancient watches balanced ore with irrigation schedules. Thermoses click open, pouring cinnamon tea that steams into the dark, and tiny solar heaters warm cold toes. The telescope's metal chills fingers, yet quilts stitched with constellation patterns hang over shoulders. Local elders share stories of sky beings as metaphors for responsibility rather than dominion, emphasizing the cadence of tending pumps and gardens. Fireflies blink near solar lanterns, as if echoing old mirror flashes. The horizon hushes, tea steams, constellations drift with patience tasting of cinnamon smoke and river mist. In academia's digital repositories, cross-reference datasets now pair star movements with crop yields, the interface glowing pale against researchers' faces as servers hum like distant bees. Graduate students scroll through entries linking lunar eclipses to barley harvest reports, their fingertips smudging trackpads. Each record ties to translations mentioning watches, highlighting how their story encoded logistics, the creak of water wheels, the glint of polished mirrors, the comfort of a chant in darkness. Backup drives smell faintly of warm circuitry, reminding us that even now, guardians are algorithms searching for patterns. Scholars debate terminology and message boards, yet the practical value stands luminous. Ritual as infrastructure, myth as spreadsheet. These archives carry the soft click of keystrokes that resemble rain. Are we ready to accept that care, not conquest, defines celestial authority? Somewhere in the night between Euphrates reeds and orbital satellites, the idea of the watchers hovers like a low, steady chord, vibrating through polished metal, damp clay, and the stories we whisper to keep storms at bay. The scent is neither purely incense nor ozone, but something in between, a reminder that every measurement we inherit carries fingerprints of awe. Listen to the scratch of stylus, the click of keyboard, the sigh of reed beds. They form a single breath-holding space for questions we no longer ask aloud. Perhaps the sky beings were always the name we gave to responsibility shared across generations, a way to cradle duty in starlight. Perhaps their wings were simply the wide reach of human hands stretching toward accuracy, fingertips cooled by night wind. Yet the stars keep their own counsel, and the canals glisten in moonlight whether we speak or sleep, suggesting that the mystery remains content to glide just beyond our fingertips. The night breathes across the ziggurat's ghosted steps, and somewhere a quiet archivist lifts another lid. In the University of Pennsylvania's cloistered study room, the single remaining wick of a beeswax candle trembles as curator Amrita Shah eases open a cedar box scented with camphor and desert dust. Inside rests a steer-tight weight from Dillman Waters, its edges smooth as river stones, bearing a faint engraving of a horned figure leaning over a tide gate marked with star glyphs. Under a magnifier, salt crystals glint like miniature constellations, telling how merchants credited the watches for tides that rose obediently beneath moonlight. Amrita wets a cotton swab in rosewater to reveal a tiny inscription noting the precise angle to set a sluice plank when Orion rose waist-high in the southern sky. She hums a melody her grandmother used, letting the notes soften the sterile hum of climate control, and wonders if voices carried across the gulf in the same tender cadence, offering gratitude to sky tutors who kept boats from grounding on hidden sandbars. Far east in the ruins of ancient Europark, archaeologists recently found driftwood beams darkened with age, their grains saturated with the scent of old river mud. Embedded in the beam's mortise was a copper peg etched with cuneiform, an instruction to align flood barriers whenever the watcher's torch appeared above the western horizon. Conservation scientist Mateo Ruiz runs fingertip sensors along the peg, measuring micro-scratches shaped by centuries of adjustments, each groove a handshake between human caution and celestial instruction. He feels the coolness of copper under laboratory light, hears the hush of filtration units, and tastes the iron tang on the air that bleeds from aged metal. The peg is small enough to sit in his palm, yet it speaks of entire neighborhoods spared from drowning. He logs the data in a spreadsheet that glows soft aquamarine, the rose pulsing like a heartbeat, and thinks how many unnamed caretakers once pressed their hands against the same token of trust. In one of the British Museum's basement rooms, smelling faintly of parchment and wax polish, an overlooked Phoenician ostracon receives new attention. Linguist Layla Haddad tilts it beneath a fiber-optic thread that shivers like a line of starlight. The ink reveals traders dedicating a cedar shipment to the watchful guests of Anu, asking safe winds for a voyage toward Tyre. Layla traces the letters with the edge of a breath, not daring to touch, while notes of lemon oil from cleaning cloths drift in the air. She hears the far-off rumble of foot traffic overhead, yet remains inside the hush of ancient bureaucracy, where myths guided interregional contracts. The ostracon's chipped edges smell of chalk and sea spray, a fossilized fragment of dialogue between coastal merchants and the sky beings they believe tallied debts more accurately than any human scribe. On the Maltese island of Gozo, within the Gantesia temple whose limestone corridors remain cool even under the summer sun, researchers uncovered a terracotta plaque showing winged figures pouring water into terraced basins. Archaeobotanist Sophia Elul kneels in the half-light, the air scented with thyme and crushed shells beneath her knees as she brushes away powdery dust. A nearby sound recorder hums faintly, capturing the muted coo of rock doves echoing through the megalithic halls. The figures' halos are not celestial crowns, but arcs indicating measured angles. Embedded pigments, when sampled, contain traces of crushed lapis that once glowed like twilight. Sophia inhales the mineral sweetness and notes down how the basins align to winter solstice sunlight, their overflow channels leading to barley plots. Islanders may have adapted Mesopotamian watcher lore via maritime gossip, weaving outlandish tales into practical manuals for water storage on a rock that drinks in every drop of rain. She feels the limestone walls chill against her palm and thinks of patient hands coaxing water from stone, accompanied by whispered prayers to far-off mentors. In the Indus Valley's ancient city of Lothal, monsoon rains left a glaze of damp clay across the dockyard floor, releasing the scent of wet earth and distant jasmine. During the last excavation season, a carnelian bead etched with microscopic wedge marks emerged from a drainage channel. Under electron microscopy, the signs correspond to a Mesopotamian syllable set meaning sky accountant, while the bead's drilled hole carries residue of coconut shell oil, suggesting it was once threaded as a talisman worn by harbour masters who balanced trade ledgers by the tide. Historian Priyanka Desai flexes her stiff fingers after hours at the scope, listening to distant thunder roll across Gujarat's fields. She murmurs the probable Akkadian phrase, the syllables round and unfamiliar yet soothing. The bead's polished warmth transfers to her glove, and she imagines the quiet pride of port officials aligning ships' departures with constellations watched by unseen mentors north of the Arabian Sea. High in the Zagros Mountains, a cave altar used during the Kassite era still smells of damp limestone and lingering juniper smoke. A field team recently discovered a basalt slab carved with a procession of 3 tall figures whose feathered mantles curve like protective wings. Behind them, smaller human figures grind grains in rhythm, each accompanied by a carved star. Portable spectrometers detect traces of red ochre on the wings, while trace elements in the mortar between floor stones reveal powdered magnetite, making compasses aligned to the altar. Field acoustician Lena Forrer glides a hand along the wall, feeling its clammy chill, and sets a low vibration through the cave using a tuning fork. The resonance rises like a distant hum, amplifying in pockets where watchers were once invoked. She closes her eyes as the tone wraps around her, a soft blanket of sound, and considers how ancient ceremonies may have synchronized heartbeats with the breathing mountain, letting participants feel held by invisible supervisors. In a glass-walled laboratory in Tokyo, paleobotanist Kenji Moriyama tends a petri dish of date palm pollen retrieved from a Neo-Assyrian jar sealed with bitumen. The preservation smell is sharp, almost like tar warmed in sunlight. Under ultraviolet light, the pollen grains reveal microscopic inscriptions scratched onto their container's interior, instructions specifying when to scatter pollen based on the signal from the North Watchers. Kenji adjusts his face shield, his breath fogging the plastic momentarily, as he copies the characters into a digital log. He notes how the instructions align with a modern understanding of night temperatures optimal for pollination. Outside the lab, neon lights blur against winter drizzle, yet inside, steel cabinets reflect a calm glow. It becomes clear that divine narratives served as mnemonic devices, anchoring delicate agricultural timing in stories that sang through generations. The pollen glitters like golden dust under magnification, reminding Kenji of the stars. Anunnaki envoys were said to rearrange in the sky. Within a quiet wing of the Vatican Apostolic Library, a Syriac manuscript from the early 6th century rests beneath a pane of ultra-clear glass. Scholar Marta Youssef leans close, her breath perfumed with chamomile tea taken to steady nerves. The parchment edges smell faintly of frankincense, suggesting it once travelled with pilgrims. The manuscript translates earlier Babylonian watcher rituals into Christianized language, yet retains detailed tables for calibrating nocturnal vigils with the phases of Venus. The scribe describes the silver glow on altar cloths, the feel of dew-damp stone under bare knees, and the soft chiming of bronze bowls used to mark the hours. Marta hears only the murmur of air vents, yet she copies the tables into a notebook embossed with gold stars, feeling a kinship with the ancient author who merged reverence with meticulous timekeeping. The manuscript's crimson pigments shimmer under light like embers banked beneath ash, hinting that knowledge survived by adapting, never sleeping. In the arid expanses of the Arabian Peninsula, a 2025 drone survey reveals petroglyphs near Jubba, depicting towering figures with mirrored discs held to the horizon. The drone's rotors stir sand that smells sun-baked and ancient, while the pilot monitors the feed in a trailer cooled to a crisp chill by humming generators. Among the carvings, a small inscription in early Aramaic mentions those who watch the skies seem, advising caravan chiefs on when to depart to avoid sandstorms. Geologist Mona Al-Sadiq lifts a 3D printed replicate disc, its surface polished to mimic the original's obsidian sheen, and feels how light bounces in slender beams. She sweeps the disc across the desert evening, watching glimmers dance, imagining signals flashing between distant watchposts. The desert breeze brushes her cheeks like soft wool, carrying dust that tastes faintly of salt. She records a voice memo, the words quiet as a lullaby, noting that myth bridged kilometers of dunes by letting humans pretend they were guided by beings perched beyond the sky's edge. A recent expedition to the Caucasus foothills unearthed a Eurasian bronze bowl hammered thin as a dew droplet. Inside the bowl, etched lines trace lunar cycles paired with instructions for maintaining mountain terraces. Conservator Galen Petrosyan whispers to the artifact as he cleans it, the Armenian lullaby vibrating in the sterile lab that smells of ethanol and laundered cotton. The etchings compare the watcher's wings to clouds resting on peaks, instructing farmers to redirect meltwater precisely when those clouds blush pink at dawn. Galen glides a sable brush along the bowl's interior, releasing a soft metallic tang. He feels a gentle weight settle in his chest, respect for unseen caretakers who converted meteorological observation into mythic choreography. The bowl's rim hums when lightly struck, a note lingering in the lab's quiet as though the mountain still speaks through alloy. In the rainforests bordering the Mayan lowlands, a recent find is puzzling epigraphers, a small jade pendant carved with a hybrid of Mesopotamian winged iconography and Maya glyphs referencing visitors from the Eastern Sea who count stars. The pendant rests on a reed mat in a humidity-controlled display case that smells faintly of damp moss. Anthropologist Anna Ikshel adjusts her headphones, listening to recordings of Chekshi's elders recounting tales of luminous strangers who taught canal maintenance before departing on a serpent of light. The pendant's surface is cool, almost slick, like water-polished stone. Anna imagines a transoceanic exchange of ideas, perhaps through wandering traders or shipwreck survivors, where the watchers became new story keepers in a jungle saturated with cheering insects and lime-scented rain. She writes notes in flowing script, each letter a thread connecting continents, knowing the truth may be layered with legend, but still rooted in shared human need for guidance beneath unpredictable skies. In a subterranean vault beneath Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, a tower of scrolls tied with faded ribbons emits a faint aroma of sandalwood and old silk. Ottoman court records reveal a secretive guild called the Night Illuminators, whose members carried copper lanterns and polished mirrors to track planetary conjunctions. Historian Osman Erdem unwraps a scroll that crackles softly, revealing a depiction of winged figures instructing guild members to time the closing of the Bosphorus lamps so fishermen could navigate tides. The ink has oxidized into a gentle bronze hue. Osman runs his fingers above the script, not touching, feeling a phantom warmth rising from the parchment. He imagines the ripple of lamplight on the strait, the whisper of oars, the oil smell of lanterns, and the quiet comfort of believing the watchers hovered just beyond sight, ensuring safe harbor. Thousands of kilometers away, in the Andes' high-altitude air, a newly catalogued Incan quipu uses dyed cords to encode a schedule for lunar observances aligned with irrigation. Quipu expert Mariela Castillo sits in a Cusco lab perfumed by coca tea and wool blankets drying near a heater. Each knot carries a faint scent of alpaca fiber and smoked chili. When she translates the quipu's pattern, she finds references to sky guardians beloved of the Eastern storytellers, likely knowledge carried by traders along the Amazonian corridor, where Mesopotamian sailors may have drifted in early contacts. The cords guide terrace keepers to channel meltwater during full moons, relying on watchers whose wings are now woven from cloud and myth. Mariella glides the cords across her palm, the fibers whispering against her skin, and records the pattern into a database that hums with quiet confidence. In a modern desalination plant near Kuwait City, engineer Laith Mansour consults a digital replica of a Babylonian tablet while calibrating intake valves that smell of brine and lubricating oil. The replica, projected onto a fogged glass panel, shows instructions for balancing tidal influx signed by a scribe serving the watchers. Laith runs his gloved hand through cool mist, feeling droplets bead on synthetic fabric, and smiles softly as he adjusts a control wheel. The old ratios line up with his sensor's readouts, bridging thousands of years through shared mathematics. He keeps the replica open, letting its cuneiform glow cobalt in the dim control room, a talisman for nights when the hum of turbines becomes a lullaby. He wonders if the watchers would recognize their methods living inside desalination algorithms, and the thought steadies him like a hand on his shoulder. On the floor of a museum in Mexico City, an interactive display gently exhales cool air smelling of eucalyptus, while showing children how Mesopotamian star maps compare with Aztec tonalamatal calendars. Educator Lucia Reyes guides them with a soft voice, describing watchers as librarians of the sky who once stood atop step pyramids far away. She plays a recording of a reconstructed Mesopotamian frame drum, its low pulse resonating through the hall, blending with whispering visitors. The children's eyes reflect the blue glow of projected constellations, their small fingers tracing lines between stars, discovering that myths cross oceans on vessels of curiosity. Lucia watches a girl close her eyes, sway gently to the beat, and she sees the ancient story settling softly into a new heart. In a granite-walled chamber beneath Nubian sands, archaeologists uncovered a scarab-sealed jar containing dried lotus petals. The petals, still fragrant with a faint sweet aroma, surrounded a papyrus scroll offering thanks to the watchers for teaching the rhythm of annual Nile pulses. Egyptologist Abdu El Sayed carefully rehydrates the papyrus with steam that curls like mist, revealing hieratic script describing ceremonies where priests chant along terrace walls to coordinate sluice gates. The text mentions the coolness of water splashing ankles, the sound of frogs joining the chorus, and the silvery light of Sothis rising, a familiar star to Mesopotamian observers. Abdu copies the lines, hearing only his own breathing and the distant hum of desert wind filtered through the excavation tent. He imagines farmers smiling softly as water obeyed their pleas, the aroma of freshly wet soil lifting into the night like gratitude. In a quiet farmhouse in rural Brittany, an old trunk yields a 17th century sailor's logbook smelling of sea salt and aged leather. The sailor describes docking in Aleppo and receiving a charm depicting a winged being holding a net. The charm, he writes in neat French script, was said to represent les veilleurs du ciel, guardians who taught fishermen to read moon-silvered ripples. Historian Claudine Marchand turns the charm over in her palm. It is cool, with tiny grooves that catch the lamplight. Outside, rain taps softly on slate roof tiles, and the hearth crackles. She can almost taste the salted cod simmering in the adjacent kitchen, mingling with smoke. The charm's story may seem fanciful, yet the sailor noted lunar phases alongside his catch. Claudine copies the data into a new spreadsheet, linking Breton fishing practices to whispers from the Euphrates. Somewhere in the Sierra Nevada's foothills, archivist Henry Wallace catalogues letters from gold rush miners who adopted watcher nights to plan irrigation for hillside farms. The letters smell of pipe smoke and river mud, stored in a cedar chest. They recount how a visiting scholar from San Francisco read out translations of tablets, inspiring miners to watch the stars for irrigation cues. Henry smoothed the letter dated 1854, the ink faded to soft brown. The writer describes the cool breeze off the river, the taste of pine sap on calloused fingers, and the comfort of believing Anunnaki eyes gleamed above the rugged canyon. The letters map water releases to star risings, showing myth wedded to survival in a new frontier. Henry leans back, listens to the whisper of his own breath in the archival room, and smiles at the continuity. Within a futuristic greenhouse in Doha, botanist Reem Khoury cultivates salt-tolerant barley using irrigation algorithms modelled on Sumerian canal logs. The greenhouse air is humid and warm, tinged with the aroma of wet earth and citrusy fertilizers. LED grow lights cast a magenta glow, turning the barley leaves into shimmering blades. Reem runs her hands through the crop, feeling cool moisture against her skin, then checks a wall-mounted display showing the phases of the moon alongside pump schedules labelled Watcher Mode. She built the interface to honor the ancient supervisors, letting the term whisper through modern code. Outside, desert night wraps the city in stillness, yet inside, the barley sways gently to the hum of circulation fans. She sips mint tea, inhales its sharp sweetness, and thinks of the long chain of guardians who kept bread on tables by listening to stars. In a candlelit room in Fez, Morocco, calligrapher Nabil Idrissi copies a medieval astrolabe treatise onto parchment scented with almond oil. The treatise references Anu's luminous envoys guiding Andalusian astronomers during drought years. Nabil's reed pen glides, the ink releasing a faint metallic note. Through the open window, night jasmine perfumes the air, and distant drums from a wedding celebration pulse softly. The script curves like flowing water, each line a meditation. He pauses to sprinkle gold dust across a diagram, watching it glitter as if starlight settled into ink. The treatise reminds readers to align canals with moonrise, blending myth with Islamic hydraulic wisdom. Nabil smiles, satisfied that the watchers have found a home in his alphabet, humming an old hymn while the ink dries. At a research station near Lake Chad, climatologist Aminata Doumbia compares modern satellite rainfall maps, smelling faintly of plastic and ozone, to digitized cuneiform logs. She hears the soft whir of servers and the rhythm of her own typing. The logs instruct watchers to observe wind flecks on water, to anticipate floods, a technique local fishermen still use. Aminata steps outside, feels warm, humid air wrap around her like a blanket, and watches ripples shimmer under moonlight. She records their pattern, her tablet emitting a pale glow. The line between ancient observation and modern climate science dissolves like sugar in tea. She wonders if the Anunnaki were simply ancestral scientists immortalized so communities would trust their guidance. Inside, the data grid pulses green, each square a note in a soothing, endless lullaby of preparedness. In the Museum of the Future in Dubai, a serene gallery diffuses oud and sandalwood, while holographic watches stride among viewers, gently narrating irrigation schedules and astronomical trivia. The floor vibrates subtly, simulating the rumble of ancient drums. Visitors recline on cushioned platforms and feel cool air drift down like night wind across the Euphrates. The holograms explain how polished gypsum mirrors once flashed signals between towers. Teenagers lift their wrists to feel a faint buzz when imaginary beams pass through their palms. Curator Amina Rashid watches from the control booth, adjusting audio levels so whispers remain gentle. She hopes the experience rekindles respect for caretaking as a sacred vocation amid skyscrapers of glass and steel. Outside, traffic murmurs like a distant sea, yet inside the gallery, time slows to a tender hush. On a research vessel gliding through the Coral Sea, marine biologist Peter Lange studies coral growth rings while listening to digitized Anunnaki hymns piped softly through deck speakers. The salty breeze cools his cheeks, the scent of sunscreen and wet rope lingers. The hymns, reconstructed from tablets, describe watchers counting the breaths of the ocean. Peter compares ring data to recorded eclipses, finding correlations that suggest ancient sailors recognized bleaching events. He scribbles notes with a pen that squeaks against waterproof paper, each stroke accompanied by the slap of waves against the hull. Above him, constellations scatter like spilled salt. He feels a kinship with the old watchers who loved the sea, enough to memorize its moods, and his heart steadies in the ship's gentle sway. In an underground metro station in Paris, a street musician plays a replica of the Lyre, the notes floating through tunnels smelling of damp stone and espresso. Commuters slow, lulled by the instrument's warm resonance. Nearby, an art installation projects translations of watch duties onto mosaic tiles, telling passers-by how ancient skywardens guided canal floodgates. A child clutches her mother's hand, eyes wide as she reads about bronze mirrors and moonlit rooftops. The mother inhales the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from a kiosk, and for a moment, the rush of modern life softens. The music carries hints of cedar and copper, conjuring images of star-crowned mentors whispering from the mezzanine. The station becomes a capsule of time. The watchers schedule overlaying train timetables, both orchestrating movement in a city that never sleeps. A hushed community centre in Reykjavik hosts an overnight solstice vigil, where participants map aurora patterns against Babylonian star charts. The air tastes of cinnamon buns and coffee, woolen blankets trap warmth. Outside, snow muffles the world until footsteps crunch like whispers. Inside, the charts gleam under LED lamps. Organizer Lilja Hrafnsdottir invites attendees to note when green curtains ripple across the sky and compare them to ancient omen lists stored on tablets now digitized. They log each shimmer into a shared spreadsheet, the soft tapping of keys harmonizing with gentle throat singing. The watcher's mythology, transplanted into polar light, becomes a lens for modern aurora science. Lilja feels the cold seeping through the windows, yet the community's gathered breath keeps her serene. On a hillside near Petra, Jordan, archaeologists recently exposed Nabatean cistern engravings crediting sky guests of Babylon for teaching them to harvest flash floods. The cistern's interior smells of cool stone and lingering dampness. Archaeologist Farah Kabani lowers a sensor, the cable whispering against carved stairs. The engravings depict winged beings pouring water from jars, while scribes tally on ostrich eggshell tablets. Farah's fingers brush a leftover grain of sand still adhering to the wall, its texture sharp. She notes how the channels align with star positions that signal rainy seasons. The desert evening wraps her in gentle chill as she climbs out, the sky bruised purple, and she whispers thanks to distant teachers who turned storms into allies. In a high-rise apartment in Seoul, Digital historian Min Jun Kim runs a neural network that maps parallels between K-drama plot arcs about guardian spirits and ancient narratives of the Watchers. His room smells of fresh ink from a nearby printer and the subtle citrus of a diffuser. The screen bathes his face in bluish glow. The model highlights how characters who oversee cities from rooftops echo. Anunnaki imagery preserved through Silk Road tales. Min Jun, sipping barley tea, records each data point while ambient music brushes the quiet like a feather. He isn't seeking proof of literal gods, he's tracing the endurance of a comforting idea, someone awake in the night, ensuring things do not fall apart. At a campus in Lagos, architecture students design flood-resilient housing guided by cuneiform flood warnings. The studio smells of sawdust, glue, and the distant savour of roasted plantains from street vendors. Professor Ifeoma Okafor projects tablet translations onto a whiteboard, the glyphs shimmering. She explains how Watchers coordinated multi-tier levees using reed whistles and mirror flashes. Students shape clay models, fingers slick with water, replicating reed bundling techniques. Outside, humid air hums with generators. Inside, the whispers of kneaded clay and pencils scratching paper create a rhythmic hush. Ifeoma senses the ancient guardians smiling through the dust motes swirling in sunbeams. In a modest house in Lima, textile artist Renata Paredes embroiders a tapestry depicting winged watchers hovering above canals lined with reed baskets. The cloth smells of alpaca wool and lavender sachets. She threads metallic gold through indigo fields, the needle sliding with a soft hiss. Each stitch outlines a star over a sluice gate, echoing instructions gleaned from digitized tablets. A cat dozes nearby, its fur warm against her ankle. Renata hums a lullaby her grandmother used, mapping myth onto thread. The tapestry will hang in a public library, a quiet reminder that irrigation patterns can be as beautiful as constellations. The fabric drapes across her lap like a gentle tide. In the Australian outback, an Anangu elder named Carla sits beside a fire scented with eucalyptus smoke, telling researchers how ancestral beings taught stargazing techniques to gauge creek flows. She recalls a story of visitors from the West who carried mirrors. Anthropologist Max Jensen listens, recording the tale beneath a sky so clear the Milky Way looks like spilled milk. The fire crackles, spraying ember sparks that rise like escaping stars. Max shares interpretations of Anunnaki myths, and Carla nods slowly, weaving her words with his. The night expands, filled with insect chirps, and the watchers become part of a shared tapestry of caretaking, stretching from Mesopotamia to Dreamtime. In a solar-powered archive in Nairobi, librarian Wanjiru Kamau curates a digital exhibition titled Guardians of the Night, Data from Distant Past. The room smells of clean plastic and tea masala. She scans a 19th century Swahili poem referencing winged beings who taught sailors to read star compass points. She overlays the poem with NOAA current charts, showing accuracy that startles her. The monitors emit soft white light, while outside the window, the city's heartbeat pulses in muffled car horns. Wanjiru adjusts her headset, listening to ocean waves recorded on Lamu, and arranges the exhibition interface so visitors can glide seamlessly between poetry, chart, and tablet. She whispers to herself that data, like myth, is a kind of lullaby, structured, rhythmic, reassuring. In a Berlin biotech lab, the team analyzes clay DNA from an ancient tablet, discovering spores from medicinal herbs described as gifts from the Watchers. The lab smells sterile, punctuated by hints of isopropyl alcohol. Researcher Hannah Vogt peers into a microscope, noting the spore's delicate structures illuminated by a cool LED. The accompanying text instructs healers to plant the herbs under specific stars to ensure potency. Hannah, wearing soft nitrile gloves, flips through digital references confirming that these nights coincide with dew-heavy conditions ideal for germination. She plays a binaural beat track to stay calm, letting the gentle throbbing mimic ancient drums. The threads connecting myth and microbiology weave quietly, resilient under scrutiny. In the Appalachian Mountains, folklorist Jonah Banks sits in a porch rocker that creaks like a contented sigh. Fireflies wink in humid air scented with honeysuckle. He interviews an elder who recounts how her ancestors, Scotch-Irish settlers, adopted tales of watcher angels from travelling peddlers carrying Mesopotamian storybooks. They used the tales to set times for burning brush to protect crops. Jonah records the story on a vintage tape deck that whirs softly. The elder's voice, gentle as creek water over stones, describes night fires reflecting in polished tin plates to signal neighbours. Jonah notes the parallels to mirror flashes on that distant plain and feels the watcher's presence slip into the mountains, soft as mist. In a Seattle tech startup, a team of programmers designs an AI named Mass.Sirah. Sirah.tu, coded to monitor infrastructure sensors. Their office smells of coffee, solder, and fresh paint. Lead engineer Alana Patel sets the AI's interface to display a gentle star field, nodding to the ancient watchers. Mass.Sirah. W cross-references rainfall data with reservoir gates, alerting human supervisors when adjustments are needed. The interface emits a soft chime reminiscent of distant bells. Alana leans back in her chair, hears the hum of servers, and smiles at the continuity between clay tablets and predictive algorithms. They are all the same promise: someone stays awake so others may sleep. On the slopes of Mount Nemrut at dawn, tourists wrap themselves in blankets against the chill that smells of cold stone and time. Guides speak in hushed tones about statues of winged beings aligned with star risings described in cuneiform sources. As the sun eases over the horizon, the stone faces glow honey gold. One visitor, historian Selen Kaya, holds an infrared thermometer out of habit, noting the temperature shift that ancient watchers may have sensed through bare skin. She bites into a piece of dried apricot, tasting sunshine stored in fruit, and reflects on how the mountain's silence amplifies the message: observation is devotion. In a Kentucky cavern, hydrologists map subterranean rivers using sonar pulses that reverberate like distant thunder. The air smells of damp limestone and ancestral chill. A newly found inscription on the cavern wall, likely carved by a Civil War-era traveller, references Shinar watchers advising when to open cave gates to release stored water. Hydrologist Deja Brooks runs her fingers across the carved letters, feeling the roughness under flashlight glow. The sonar equipment emits soft clicks. The cavern answers with echoes. Deja records the inscription, linking it to an oral tradition among local farmers who still consult stars before diverting springs. The watcher's guidance thrives beneath the earth, in the heartbeat of hidden rivers. In a Kyoto tea house, ceramicist Emi Tanaka glazes cups with pigments matched to the colors described in Babylonian sky omens. The tea room smells of roasted matcha and kiln heat. She listens to shakuhachi flute music, its tones airy and soothing. Each cup features subtle wing motifs, the glaze pooling like moonlight on still ponds. Emi believes that holding such a cup can remind a drinker to observe the sky before pouring tea, honouring both tradition and sustainability. As steam rises from a freshly brewed bowl, it mingles with the scent of clay, and she envisions watchers nodding approval from soft clouds. In a Johannesburg planetarium, an evening show titled Star Keepers of Mesopotamia projects constellations onto a dome scented lightly with vanilla to calm visitors. Narrator Saifo Delamani speaks in a low, resonant voice, guiding attendees through stories of winged watchers advising on seasonal migrations. The audience reclines in padded chairs. Faint vibrations mimic a heartbeat. Saifo's words melt into the ambient hum, encouraging listeners to breathe slowly. Outside, the city's lights twinkle. Inside, a child reaches up, fingers splayed, as if to catch a falling star. For an hour, the watchers keep vigil in a hemisphere of gentle darkness. On the shores of Lake Baikal, a Russian researcher named Galina Orlova studies wooden prayer plaques left by Buryat fishermen. The plaques smell of pine sap and incense. One plaque depicts a winged being offering a mirror to a fisherman, with annotations referencing star alignments taught by travelers from the west. Galena dips a quill into ink, transcribing the notes while the lake's breeze brushes her cheek with icy fingers. Waves lap softly, a constant hush. She feels the watcher's story settling into the water's memory, carried on ripples and reflected in night skies as ancient as time. At a rooftop garden in New York City, urban farmers adjust hydroponic flows based on lunar data shared in an online forum called Anunnaki Commons. The garden smells of basil, damp soil, and city rain. Organizer Miguel Torres logs water pH under string lights that glow warm gold. He plays a playlist of reconstructed Mesopotamian lullabies, letting the notes wrap around seedlings. The group maintains polished steel panels to reflect moonlight onto sensors, a nod to ancient mirror signaling. Ambulance sirens murmuring below blend with soft conversation. The Watcher's myth becomes a practical communal ritual, linking skyscraper dwellers to river plains in the hush of twilight. At a remote Arctic research station, light snow squeaks under boots. Paleolithic artifacts indicate migratory communities sang to winged north guides when aligning sled trails by stars. Anthropologist Erica Smith listens to Inuit elders describe similar songs. The station smells of diesel heaters and dried fish. Erica holds a reconstructed antler batten etched with tiny star maps, its surface cold and smooth. The elders' voices roll like gentle surf, recounting how light dances across ice when watchers approve. Erica presses record on her device, capturing the cadence for future study. Outside, aurora flickers, and she senses a gentle presence in the shimmering sky. In a Manila art studio, multimedia artist Jora Cruz edits a video montage of global watcher traditions projected onto a mist curtain. The room smells of acrylic paint and rain-damp concrete. She overlays a soft, heartbeat-like pulse composed from ancient drum rhythms. The projection shows farmers, coders, canal diggers, all in quiet communion with stars. Viewers walk through the mist, feeling cool droplets kiss their skin. Jora's cat curls on a windowsill, purring. She titles the piece, Stewards of the Upper Chamber, sending it to a virtual exhibit. The watcher's story becomes a collective lullaby, whispered across pixels. In a Moscow observatory, astrophysicist Pavel Lebedev compares gravitational wave charts to cuneiform predictions of celestial tremors. The observatory smells of old books and cold metal. He sips black tea, its warmth spreading through his chest, and marks correlations where ancient watchers recorded stars singing. The data points line up with surprising accuracy. Pavel smiles softly, the glow of monitors reflecting in his glasses. He murmurs a quiet thank you to those who watched before him, acknowledging that even in the realm of black holes and space-time, the gentle guardians hum in the background. In a Namibian desert camp, ethnobotanist Thandi Jacobs catalogues herbal remedies attributed to skykeepers introduced via ancient caravan routes. The campfire crackles, releasing a scent of acacia wood and sage. Stars explode across a sky so clear it feels close enough to touch. Thandi labels each specimen by lamplight, the paper warm beneath her fingers. She listens to elders speak of winged figures leaving patterns in sand to mark planting seasons. The sand beneath her mat retains the day's heat, pressing comfort into her spine. She writes that myth is the memory palace of practicality, shimmering in moonlit dunes. In Buenos Aires, archivist Carlos Medina digitizes a tango from the 1920s that references guardian angels of Shinar. The vinyl smells of old paper and aged shellac. When the needle touches the groove, a soft crackle warms the air, followed by a languid melody. The lyrics compare longing lovers to watchers navigating constellations. Carlos adjusts his headphones, eyes closed, letting the rhythm cradle him. He tags the track with keywords linking it to Mesopotamian lore, ensuring future listeners can trace the lineage. Outside, rain taps against windows, a percussive lull. The melody fades, but the watcher's embrace lingers in the slow sway of memory. In Jerusalem's Old City, a hidden courtyard garden smells of jasmine and damp stone. Scholar Yael Ben-Ami uncovers a Crusader-era note tucked in the mortar of a cistern wool, thanking the Watchers from Babel for teaching how to direct runoff. The parchment crinkles under her gentle touch. Candlelight casts soft shadows across the courtyard, flickering like wings. She copies the note, feeling gratitude ripple through centuries, and imagines knights in chainmail listening to artisans from far lands explaining water flow by starlight. The cistern's water shimmers in torch glow, reflecting the watchful gaze of a sky full of patient stars. In a quiet hospice room in Melbourne, caregiver Arya Singh reads excerpts from ancient Watcher hymns to a patient who once studied Mesopotamian history. The room smells of lavender lotion and clean linens. The patient's breathing slows as Arya describes moonlit terraces and mirrored light. Outside, rain softens the city's sounds, leaving only the patter against glass. Arya's voice becomes a gentle tide, blending compassion with scholarship. The myth comforts like a warm blanket, reminding both listener and reader that someone, somewhere, has always promised to stay awake through the night. In the silence between heartbeats, the Watchers remain, etched into clay, coded into spreadsheets, humming through fibre optics and reed flutes alike. Their story spreads across continents, carried by the scent of incense and rain, by the taste of brine and honeyed bread, by the tender brush of night wind on patient faces. They teach that guardianship is a chain of hands, each palm passing the weight of responsibility with care. Whether carved in stone or whispered over internet connections, their wings still shadow our workbenches, our rooftops, our quiet midnight desks. The stars above glimmer steady, mirroring lanterns below. Somewhere, a stylus scratches softly against damp clay. A keyboard clicks in measured cadence. A drum murmurs low. The Watchers watch, yes, but so do we, waking gently to our place in the long, luminous